Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Alisa. I hope you're all doing so good today. We're going to be doing a little bit of a mishmash video today, and I'm going to be talking about my experience going to the Portland Book Festival for 2024. I have gone for many years now. I think I've gone at least 5 years, I believe, and I love it, adore it every time. It's amazing. I always cry every time, at least once. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit in more detail for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to give a sense of what the festival is like in case you are local and want to attend it. Now, I live in Seattle. I don't live in Portland, but it's only a 3-hour drive, so it's very easy for me to go. So if you're in the general vicinity and want to attend, maybe this will give you a good idea of what you can expect to find there. And then also, I have a huge haul from the festival this year, and I just have too many books that I've accumulated to do a haul, at least for me, and not have it be extremely long. So I'm trying to separate out the books that I hauled specifically at the festival to the books that I've hauled just outside of that the past couple of months, because there's just too many now. So this will be kind of a bookish chat about the festival itself. I'm going to be talking through the sessions that I attended and giving you a little bit of information about them. And then I'll also be talking about the books that I hauled that are separate from the sessions, because some are related. So we're going to go ahead and get into the sessions that I attended. I attended 4 sessions, and I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown of which ones I tried to get into and could not because there was no longer room, and then which ones I actually saw. So I'll be using my little guide. I've saved it so I can show you all, and I'm going to show you the sessions page. This is what you use to determine which ones you want to go to, because there are multiple sessions that happen at any given time. So you are going to have to choose. It's a little bit like choosing your kids, which authors you want to see more. That's always a difficult part of this, but it's kind of an embarrassment of riches because there are lots of great authors to choose from. So this is what the session page looks like. You won't be able to actually see. I think the font is too tiny, but that's how many sessions we're talking about going on here, and you can see how much they overlap. So going in, I always try to determine which ones are my must go to sessions, and those are the sessions that I'm going to make sure I arrive to early to get in line to make sure I can get a spot. Because like I said earlier, they do run out of seating room, especially for some of the popular authors. So you want to get there, I would say, at least 15 minutes up in advance to start queuing and make sure you can actually get in. For my first session of the day, I ended up going to the session with Ani DeFranco. Now, little caveat here, hopefully this isn't too confusing. Every Portland Book Festival, there are 2 sessions that are additional pay to get into. So your general admission ticket, which I think is a steal, if you get your ticket in advance, it's only $15. To me, that's crazy for how much you get out of it. But buy in advance, general admission is $15. You can get into every session with that ticket except for 2. And those are kind of the really big ticket names, or at least in the Portland Book Festival's eyes, the big ticket names. And those ones you need a higher up level ticket to get into. Normally, I do not buy that ticket because I haven't been as interested in those sessions in previous years. This year, my husband bought my ticket for me as a birthday gift, and he didn't know that I normally just get the general admission one. So he bought me like the higher tiered ticket, which includes the 2 paid sessions. The Ani DeFranco session was one of them. With those higher tier tickets, you automatically get a signed copy of the book that goes with those sessions. So I automatically got a copy of Ani DeFranco's book. Now, some of you might know who Ani DeFranco is. She's a musician, a very prolific musician. I did not know her going into this festival, so it was a surprise to me what I was going to be finding there. So I went to that session kind of last minute. I walked in after it started, but that was fine. And she was actually promoting, this is complicated given recent political events, but she was there promoting a children's book that she wrote called Show Up and Vote. And I will say, I went to the Portland Book Festival right before the United States election, so a very prescient book to be talking about. It was amazing getting to hear her speak. Actually, part of the conversation that I found really interesting was this idea of like whether or not we can be apolitical, which is a conversation that I feel like I've had a lot recently in my personal life. So it was nice to get to hear her thoughts on it, and yeah, to get to hear about this book. And I think it's great to have a children's book that's tailored around voting. I have not read this yet, but I am going to try and pick it up soon before the end of the year. And I'll show you just a little bit of the art style so you can get a sense of what it looks like. So there it is. And yeah, really enjoyed the session, and it was a great way to kind of like kick off the morning. You could tell that a lot of people in the audience were huge Ani DeFranco fans musically. What I gathered from hearing her speak is that her music is also very political in nature. So yeah, it was a great first session to start off, and I am excited to have this. And then of course it is signed. Let me see. There it is. So it's signed right up at the top here. So that is first session and first book. So for my next session, there were so many at the next time that I wanted to go to, but two in particular I kept waffling between, and that was the session with Danez Smith, who is another poet that I absolutely love. I've read all of their previous collections, and they came out with Bluff this year, and I think that was in one of my most anticipated videos for the year. They were in conversation with Diana Lee Antigua, who was promoting Good Monster, not familiar with them or that book. And then the other session I wanted to go to at the same time was the one with Chelsea Bieker. She was promoting her first novel, which is called Madwoman. She has two previous short story collections, and I've seen her speak before, and I adore her. Truly, I think Chelsea Bieker is a god among men, and I ended up going to that session. So I chose that one. It was a hard choice, but that's the decision I made, and I'm so glad that I went to that one. I was the most excited about her conversation and her book out of all of the sessions that I attended to. So this was the highlight for me. And of course, that being the case, my book stack is down here on my bed, so I'm gonna keep having to bend down to grab the books. But I ended up, of course, getting a copy of her book. This is a stunning cover. And again, I've heard Chelsea Bieker speak before at the Portland Book Festival for her short story collections, and I'm so happy she has a novel coming out. This is sort of pitched as a literary thriller, and it is mainly covering the topic of intimate partner violence. So heavy trigger warnings going into this. And Chelsea has been very honest in the past, and also with this book tour, that she herself has experienced intimate partner violence. And so I trust her being able to handle this topic with sensitivity. The premise of this is it follows a woman who is, I think, in her 30s at this point, and she's had to kind of recreate her life because she came from a very abusive background. Now she's struggling to make intimate connections, specifically friendship. And part of this book is exploring, like, when you tell lies about your life, even with the best intentions of wanting to kind of like live into the life you want because you came from a place that you want to forget, that those lies do end up building walls that prevent you from having the type of intimacy or vulnerability that you would want to have for someone to truly know you. And I think that premise is so interesting for a book, and then again, this has like a literary thriller element, so I think it's pretty fast paced. So yeah, I can't wait to read this. I'm truly so excited, and this is one that I waited in line afterwards to meet the author. I've met her before, but I wanted her to personalize my book, so I do have a lovely personalized edition, which I will treasure. So very excited. And she was in conversation for this session with, who wrote My Volcano Daughters? That's the book that they were promoting, but I can't remember her name. Let me just check. Gina Marie Bererra wrote The Volcano Daughters, I'm sorry. And that book also sounded fascinating. I did not pick up a copy of that book because it would have been in the hardcover, and I only pick up hardcovers that I know I desperately want to read right away, and I don't think I would get to The Volcano Daughters before it came out in paperback, so I'll probably just pick it up then. But they, interestingly, both have a history with Tin House, and Tin House is an independent publisher in Portland, and they were both doing their residencies with Tin House at the same time, so they knew each other quite well, and that was really fun for them to be in conversation with one another and talk about the experience of them writing these books that they're promoting with each other and kind of workshopping them with each other. Loved that. And the title of their session, all the sessions have a theme and they kind of incorporate that in the title, was On the Run. So it was two protagonists who were running from things, whether it be like personal demons in their lives, horrible family legacies, whatever it might be. That was sort of the central theme. So that was that second session that I went to, and another book that is part of my haul. So then I tried to race over to another session I really wanted to get into, and that was the session for Rachel Kong, who was promoting The Good Americans. Guess what? Didn't make it into that session. I was assuming that was going to be a really popular one. So I pivoted and raced over to another session I was still interested in, and that was the session with Brian Evanson, who was promoting Good Night Sleep Tight, another book that was on one of my most anticipated releases list for this year. And it's a horror book, and he was actually in conversation with Stephen Graham Jones, who was promoting two books because they had two books come out this year, Overachiever. They're promoting I Was a Teenage Slasher and The Angel of Indian Lake. So both of them are horror authors, and they were talking about American horror stories. That was the theme for their session. Now, I was surprised that I was able to get into this session because Stephen Graham Jones is, I think, a very popular author, and I was expecting that one to be more full, but I was able to make it in. And Stephen Graham Jones was so funny. So funny. I have not read him before. I do have interest in reading him, and it was a pleasant surprise with how much I enjoyed that talk between the two of them. Now, Stephen Graham Jones was promoting a couple of novels. The Brian Evanson book is a short story collection, but interestingly, they are both professors for college writing courses, and they talked a lot about that as well. There were a lot of audience questions about that, and I just remember someone asking like, oh, how do you balance writing and teaching, because they're both things that take a lot of like time and creative investment. And Stephen Graham Jones' response for how to deal with that was sleep less, like legitimately just sleep less. And I was like, I mean, if that's honest, that's honest. So yeah, really great session. Made me even more excited to read the Brian Evanson collection. I did not know how prolific he was. I think he's written something like almost 30 books, which is absolutely insane. I did not pick up any books from that session, mostly because at this point I was starving. It was like already 2:30 and I needed food desperately. And I will say, a little plug, if you ever go, I love getting lunch at the Behind the Museum Cafe. Part of the Portland Book Festival takes place in the Portland Art Museum. So just right behind it, like it says in the name, it's a Japanese tea house. So good, the tea and the food. So I quickly went over to get lunch and then took it to go to get in line, because my last session I went to for the day, my fourth session, was my most anticipated session. So I wanted to ensure that I actually got into it. And that's because both of the books or two that I really desperately wanted to read. So this was the hauntings session, that was the theme, and the two authors and books that were getting promoted in it were Smothermoss by Alisa Alering and Woodworm by Lila Martinez. I found out it's Lila, not Layla. And this session was really interesting as well because both of the books do incorporate a haunting of sorts, but they're in very different ways. So Woodworm, if you've heard about it, it's a really popular Two Lines press release from this year. That is a haunted house novel. It's very autobiographical, and the author is writing about basically their grandmother's experience in the very small Spanish village that she grew up in. It's also a revenge novel, and the revenge kind of comes in the form of spells and curses. So there's a little bit of a speculative element in that way. But yeah, you could tell that Lila was so passionate about that book. She really wanted the protagonists to be maids because her mother and her grandmother were maids, and she felt like maids aren't often the main protagonist of a story. They're usually a side character, and that sometimes revenge is the only recourse left to women who are living in extreme poverty and legitimately do not have a way to get out of it. And yeah, it was just really great to hear her so passionately talk about bringing this book into existence. So I did try to pick up Woodworm, but they were sold out, which honestly is phenomenal. I'm so happy for her and for Two Lines Press that they sold out of that book, but they sold out very quickly. So I was not able to get my hands on a copy and therefore not able to get her to sign it afterwards, which was very sad. But I was able to get a copy of the other book that I was interested. This is published with Tin House. That's Smothermoss, and I was able to get this one signed as well. And this one is so cute. One, there's leaves all over the title page, but she had a little stamp that she was putting in everyone's books as well, and I was like, man, you're very prepared. So love that. This book is about two sisters who are growing up in Appalachia in the 80s. They're also very poor. The haunting element in this book is in the form of a mountain that is behind their house, and the mountain has a type of energy to it, and I think you even get perspectives from the mountain in this book, and that's where some of the magic lies. This also has trigger warnings in it. I believe there's some sexual assault on the page in this, so know that going in. And this again deals with poverty. How do you reconcile where you come from and where you grow up, especially when at once it can bring you so much peace with the nature that is surrounding you, at other times brings you so much violence as well. So excited to read this book. It was a fascinating conversation between the both of them, and I'm really excited to read both. So those were the sessions that I went to, and we've already talked about 3 of the books that I've hauled, so that's great. So we're going to talk about the rest of the books that I have hauled, of which there are still many, so I'm going to try and go through them a little bit quickly because I'm cognizant I've already been talking for over 20 minutes and that I don't want this to be insanely long. The other book that I got because my husband bought me the higher tier ticket, and the other like paid session to get into was Richard Powers, and he was promoting obviously Playground, if you can see that there. This one's published by Norton. And I can see why this was one of the paid sessions. I mean, this was nominated for the Booker Prize this year. Was it the Booker? This one is also signed as well. Now, I didn't have plans to read this, but I'm not opposed to reading it, so not upset by any means that I have it. It is a beautiful book. I have not read Richard Powers before, so this will be my first foray into him, but I know he writes climate fiction, and this is all about the ocean. So I'll definitely give this a go at some point and try it out. So that is Playground. And then we have the rest of the books I got at the Book Expo. So the Portland Book Festival has multiple floors of a book expo, which have booths that are anything from like bookish goods and items to buy to publisher tables for independent publishers who are trying to sell and promote their books, a lot of whom have authors at the festival and the events themselves. So I went to 3 different publishers there. I always go to Tin House and Two Lines Press. They always have tables there, and I always pick up some books. A hot tip if you're going to go to the festival is that the publishers will often discount their books because there's no middleman. They get to sell directly to you, and therefore they'll normally discount anywhere from like 10 to 20% off. And I definitely took advantage of that. Normally Verso are also there, and I love stopping by their tent. They weren't here this year, but there was a new publisher that has not been there before that I've been interested in reading. So I'll show you those books when we get to them. So let's start with the Two Lines Press books. I picked up 3 books at their table. First one was one that I knew I was going to pick up. This is the latest in the Calico series, which again, I collect. I know I talk about this all the time, but I collect this series. This is Cigarettes Until Tomorrow, and this one is all Romanian poetry. So that's the thing that's tying this anthology collection together. Really excited, and normally they do a poetry release and then a short story release. This is the poetry one. Love it. Excited to read it. Happy to have it. So there's that one. Then I picked up A Working Woman. This is by Elvira Navarro, and it's translated by Christina McSweeney. And I think this is translated from Spanish, but I'm just double checking. I think it's translated from Spanish. It doesn't say, but I'm fairly certain. And this follows our main protagonist named Alisa, and she's telling the story of her roommate. Her roommate's name is Susanna. And Susanna has these very bizarre, very strange urges, is what it says on the back. And it says there's only one person who can satisfy them. So it's very mysterious. I like this idea of a narration told like one person removed. I think that sounds really interesting. So I'm excited for this one. So that is A Working Woman. And then the last thing I picked up from the Two Lines Press table is one that I've been wanting for a long time, and that is Linea Nigra by Jazmina Bererra, translated by Christina McSweeney. So same translator. So it is Spanish because I know that Jazmina Bererra writes in Spanish. And this is a nonfiction book about motherhood. And I think she's writing through her first pregnancy, the birthing experience, the breastfeeding experience, young motherhood, all those types of things. So I'm really excited to get to this one. And I've been wanting to read Jazmina Bererra for a long time. I heard her speak last year when she was promoting Cross Stitch, which is her novel. So very happy to have this one, and I do think this cover is gorgeous. So those are the 3 I picked up from that booth. Then I went to Two Lines Press. One of them I picked up was Smothermoss that I've already spoken about. Another one is nonfiction by Julie Myerson. This one was on my anticipated releases as well this year. And I think this one is following a mother and a daughter. The mother is a novelist, and she sort of starts revisiting her own uneasy childhood experiences as she's witnessing her daughter going through a really difficult time. And then we get that paralleled with the daughter's experience in a more present timeline. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out. And I do know that this book talks about addiction. So again, trigger warning for that. So that is nonfiction. Love the cover of that and love the title, honestly. I think it's such a fun play on this boundary between like what is real and what is not real. And then the last thing I picked up from Tin House is The Story Game. This is by Shze-Hui, and this one is a memoir, and she's talking about her experience being an immigrant. She's talking about her experience being in an interracial marriage. And then I think this also heavily revolves around talking about mental health. I'm not sure in which way particularly, but it all sounds really good. Actually, I think it might be complex PTSD. I'm seeing that somewhere down at the bottom. I've heard great things about this, and it's been a while since I've read a memoir, so I'm kind of itching to get back into it. And yeah, very excited for this. Again, on my anticipated releases for this year. And then I also picked up a pamphlet while I was at their table for a release that's going to be coming out in 2025, I believe in April. Love this, and it does look like the cover. So the cover has this kind of pink and green design with the alligator in the back. This is Helion by Julia Elliott, and it's going to be a short story collection. It says the stories range from a feral dog in medieval Europe to the heart of the contemporary South and into strange tech-mediated futures. Sounds interesting enough to me, and the pamphlet includes one of the stories from Helion, the one that involves the alligator that you see on the cover. So really excited to check that out when it comes out next year. And lastly, a newcomer to the book expo this year that I was very excited about was Split Lip Press. They haven't been there in the past that I can remember, and they had a table this year, so I picked up 2 of their books. Now, the first one I picked up is solely on the back of Sarah's recommendation from Eyes on Indie, so I'm very excited to have this. It's Sister Golden Calf by Coleen Berner, and this, Sarah has said, is a road trip novel. I know she really loved it, and it's so tiny. Also, just my luck, it happened to be when I went to buy this, they were like, oh, interestingly, Coleen Berner is a local author to Portland. She wasn't promoting anything at the festival, but she had come by the previous day to sign copies. And so I got a signed copy, which I'm so excited to have. So we have a little signature down here. So to Sister Golden Calf, I basically just know that it's a road trip novel and Sarah loved it. So we're going off of that, and good enough for me. I trust her taste. Even if I don't love it, I'm sure I could find somebody else who would love it. So that is Sister Golden Calf. And then the last one I picked up from them was a nonfiction. This is a memoir told in essays called Tracing the Desire Line by Melissa Matthewson. And this one talks about the author's experience of opening up her marriage with her husband. And the formats range in here. So I think some are essays, there's lists, there's letters, there's like hybrid kind of prose and poem. So I'm really excited to get into this and to get to read a little bit from Split Lip Press. So those are the books that I got at the festival. If you were counting, I think it's 12 or something like that. It's a lot. I think this might be the most that I've ever bought at the festival, but I've been a good book buyer this year and I'm very excited about these. And we have made it to the end of my Portland Book Festival experience for 2024. If you have ever been, please tell me down below. I would love to get to chat about your experience with you. And hopefully this gives you a good idea if you would be interested in attending the festival. So with that, I will leave you all to it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.